names that you don't really know because you might know who these people actually are. It's a true story. So I'll just call this guy Jim. And Jim and his wife and his wife's mother saved their money and they went to the Holy Land to visit. And they flew over and had a nice flight over, and that flight's about 10 to 12 hours, so it wears you out when you go. You fly out of LaGuardia in New York, and you get to Tel Aviv. You leave at midnight, and you get there about 8 o'clock the next night. So you get there in time to go to bed and sleep, and you'd already slept all night over there, so you get about 24 hours straight sleeping time. So. But anyway, they got there in Tel Aviv, and the next morning they got up and had breakfast, and they decided that they would get on this bus and go up around the northern part, up around Haifa and so forth, and look at some of the really good places to see where Jesus did his miracles and so forth. Up around, I'm trying to think of the name of that river up there, but I can't think of it now. But anyway, they were up there looking at some of the sites where Jesus healed the blind and the sick and the dead and so forth. Well, would have it that Jim's mother-in-law died. And they were distraught. They didn't know what to do. Well, the officials said, well, the best thing you can do is call the undertaker. And he knows exactly what to do and how to do what you got to have done. So anyway, they gave him the name of whoever it was to call. They called, and sure enough, he asked him, he said, well, what do we need to do? He said, we'll pick the body up and prepare it. And said, we'll either ship it back to the U.S. or we'll bury it here in Israel, just whatever you want us to do. He said, well, how about giving me a price of what it will cost? He said, okay, just wait just 1 minute. So he looked at his book and so forth. He said, well, it'll cost you $5,000 to send your mother-in-law back to the U.S. And I can bury her for $150. So we're going to bury her, I guess, for $150. So he asked his wife and so forth. So he called the guy back and he said, listen, about 2,000 years ago, we read this story about a man that died here. And 3 days later, he came back to life. We can't take that chance, so you ship her back to the USA. Now, don't throw rocks at me, please. Our lesson today, we have to go back about 2 chapters to find out exactly why we're studying what we're studying. But here in John chapter 10, depicts Jesus as the Good Shepherd. It shows his deep care and his special love for his followers. He also describes himself as the door, and that's in the second part of our lesson, revealing the fact that there is only one way and only one way for salvation. No matter what anybody tells anybody, there's still only one way. And we're going to study that today. But anyway, I'm going to give you 7 emphatic I am statements that's in the book of John. Kelly did 2 of these. She did the bread of life and also the light of the world. Well, the first one is in chapter 6 and verse number 35, which is the bread of life. Now, he was born in the house of bread, so that falls in line perfect. She did that lesson, and then last week she covered the light of the world. That's in chapter number 8 and verse number 12. Today we're going to look at two more. The first one is in chapter 10 in verse number 7, and it is, I am the door. And then the second one that we're going to look at today is in chapter 10, verse number 11, and in verse number 14, the Good Shepherd. And then number 5 is the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. Chapter 11 and verse 25. And then number 6 one is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In chapter 14 and verse number 6. And then the last one is, I am the true vine. In chapter 15 in verse 1 and verse number 5. He tells us all through the chapters, I am. Now we're going to play a little tag team here today. King David. Has anybody seen the movie King David? That really tells us a lot about our Sunday school lesson today. If you get a chance, go see it. If you don't, I'll ruin the story for you. What is a shepherd? Anybody come on, somebody tell me what a shepherd is. Cares for his flock. What else does he do? Right? What else? That's right. Now, what is a sheepfold? Yes, ma'am. It's got one door in that sheepfold. Remember that. That's important. Now, what about the doorkeeper? What is the doorkeeper? And I appreciate everybody not talking at one time. Pardon me, he protects the sheep. He does. What else does he do? He guards the door. He will not let just anybody come through that door. That's important in our Sunday school lesson today. But in order to get to where we want to be at this parable, we need to go back to chapter 8. The last part of chapter 8. And look briefly. You know when the speaker says something about briefly, you better look out. In chapter 8, and I'm not going to read the whole chapter. It's only got 59 verses. I'm going to read verse number 53. And these are the namesayers. And they're asking Christ this. Are you greater than your father Abraham, who is dead? And the prophets are dead? Who do you make yourself out to be? Now they're talking about Christ. They're talking to him. And Christ in verse number 56 says, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day come. And he saw it and he was glad. Then the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said unto them, most assuredly I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. At that statement, listen what they did. Then they took up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out into the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. That's in chapter 9, verse 1. Now let me say something about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. We think of it when we talk about the temple of we compare it to something like our church. But that's 35 or 36 acres that Temple Mount is. It'll hold way more than 1 million people at one time. So when it says that he escaped, there's plenty of room for him to escape. Don't think he's disappearing, playing disappearing acts or something, but that's not true. It's a huge place, and he did pass away. He just got out of their way. It's big. But when he left the temple, evidently he met up with his disciples in chapter number 9. And when they did, they saw a blind man as he passed by. Well, his disciples asked him the question, who sinned? Did the man sin? He was a young man. He was born without any kind of sight at all. Or was it his parents that sinned? Well, chapter 9 talks about how he spit on the ground and made some moisture with the dirt and put it on his eyes, told him to go wash out. He did, and he was able to see. It was on the Sabbath day. The Pharisees didn't like that. They wanted to do everything they could to convict Jesus of an unpardonable sin. You blaspheme if you didn't uphold the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Well, what do you think about that? Jesus is the Sabbath day, is he not? Oh, they just went all crazy. So they asked the man who did the deed. He said, a man named Jesus. He made some clay and put it on my eyes and told me to go wash it off. And he did. And he was able to see. And they said, well, who is this Jesus? Are you one of his disciples? He said, in verse number 25 of chapter 9, and I think this is fantastic what he said. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Throw everything out the door, but right now I can see. Before I could not see, but now I can. Do you know that he was excommunicated out of the temple because he made that statement? They threw him out of the temple. You can't belong in this temple. They interviewed his parents, and his parents say, he is of age. You go talk to him. He'll tell you what happened. And he did. And they said, give God the glory. No, they didn't want to do that. I believe it Kelly covered last week. Why in the world did they want to do this to Jesus? Simply because they were going to lose their jobs. They were going to lose their position. The Pharisees were evil. They were lawgivers. But they belonged to the Mosaic law. In verse number 34, and the Pharisees, it is written that, and they cast him out of the temple. In other words, they excommunicated him. Jesus asked this blind man, do you believe in the Son of God? He said he didn't know who the Son of God was. How can I know that I believe in him? So he introduced himself to this man. I am he. And he said, of course I believe in you. My youngest son and I used to get into it all the time about dinosaurs. And I told him, I said, I don't believe in dinosaurs. I just don't think they ever were. I got an opinion just like everybody else. He said, well, Daddy, it's really hard to not believe when you're in the Smithsonian Institute and you see them, the skeletons of them up there. It's hard not to believe in them. So I didn't have anything else to say about it. It's hard to believe after Jesus does something very special for you never to change your mind about believing in Jesus Christ. I don't care what anybody says. Our son passed away at the age of 32, young, strong, healthy. A year after he died, the Lord spoke to me and told me, he said, the next time you see your son, he'll be perfect. You can't change my mind about that no matter what you do or what you say. I believe it with all my heart. And I'm looking forward to that. We were down in Aiken, South Carolina a few years ago, and Glenda's grandfather was there. In fact, all of her uncles and aunts were there. House was full of people. And her granddaddy was a retired Church of God pastor. And everybody was getting ready to go home. He said, well, let's have prayer before we go. You never know when it's going to be your last time to be together. And everybody got on their knees there in the living room and prayed, I'm telling you. And you know what? That was the last time we all got together. No matter what, don't let nothing. We're living in the last days. Have you noticed all the world is going upside down? We're putting our nose where we don't need to put our nose. We're trying to run everybody's business but our own. We send millions and millions and millions of dollars. And we've got thousands of people without a home, without a piece of bread to eat, right here in America. What's wrong with us? You tune in to TV and there's a sign there that says, we'll put Jesus back on the cross. How stupid can we be? Helping all these other countries live and we're suffering. I don't need to be going there today. That's not about our Sunday school lesson. Well, let's go. I love you no matter what. But it could be our last time together. King David, he began as a shepherd. In the movie, David, you see the sheep were really, they understood his voice and they followed him. Now let me tell you a little story about it that I read in a commentary about King David. His brothers and sisters they did not have the same mother. His mother, in the mid-dress, calls her name, and I can't tell you what it was, I can't remember, but anyway. They did not believe their father, Jesse, was David's daddy. His brothers and sisters did not. So when it came time to put out a shepherd for the flock, which was one of the most dangerous jobs they had, they wanted David to do that. They thought that he'd get up there and get killed. But as the story goes in our Bibles, we read where he killed a lion, a bear, and Timbuktu, and Goliath. He killed everybody. He didn't care. He had God on his side. One thing that movie tells us more than anything else is David believed in God and King Saul did not. King Saul was the second largest man out there beside Goliath, and he was scared to death. He was out of God's will. David said, I don't want all that armor. I'll just go out. I got rocks that I picked up in the valley of Elah. I wouldn't take anything for those rocks. I got 5 of them. I'll sell them to you for a quarter apiece. They told us at the Valley of Elah they have to go in about once every couple months and replace all those rocks. Everybody that comes gets 5 stones out of that rock. Well, it's all about, I'm going to shut up about that. Let's get into the lesson. Part 1, sheep know the shepherd's voice. The Lord is talking here in a parable when it starts, the first 6 verses. Most assuredly, I say to you, he does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way. The same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters into the door of the sheepfold is a sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. In that movie, those sheep, when David would even say anything, they would just flock to him. And that's what Christ is talking about here. They know his voice, and they will follow his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger. In the sheepfold, there was more than one place where one flock of sheep was at. But there were several flocks in that sheepfold. So each shepherd would go in and call their own sheep, and they knew their voices. And it says in verse 5, yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know his voice of the stranger. Jesus used this illustration, listen, but they did not understand the things which he spoke to them. So if we go back to where we started in chapter 8 and chapter 9, that tells us why he did this parable. And no matter what he tried to do, they did not, in the illustrations that he gave, they did not understand. You would think that no matter what anybody in the world, I don't care where you go or what you do or who you see, if you explain the gospel of Jesus Christ and they believe, why won't they live right? Why won't they accept it? Of the greatest gift that's ever been told, and people will not accept it. Why? Why won't they accept it? That's true. Right. That's true. There's a lot of truth in that. You get you one in big ground, still got to have two. Well, in verse number 3 there, the doorkeeper knows the shepherd. And the doorkeeper won't let just anybody walk through that door. It's only the shepherd that can come through that door. They bring the sheep through there, and then they'll let the shepherds in, but nobody else. So if anybody else climbs over a different way, they're up to no good. They don't know the sheep. The sheep don't know them. So what are they there for? They're there to steal or to rob. And Christ speaks that word. The followers know my voice. My people will know their voice. Does Jesus ever speak to you? You'll know his voice if you are a follower. What happens when a stranger tries to lead the flock? Well, we have a lot of that today, don't we? We have a lot of that. So what happens? The sheep will follow, but the flock will be strangers, and they'll scatter. They did not know the stranger's voice. Several years ago, Glenn and I were watching TV, and they had a program about pastors and why they were filling the pulpit. And several of them had some of these huge churches. And one of them said, well, he was not a believer in what he preached. And they asked him, why are you doing what you're doing? He said, the pay is really good. It's a vocation. It's a vocation. Well, he talks about the stranger trying to lead the flock. Them dumb sheep won't follow a stranger. Ellen, it don't work that way. He'll lead them into destruction. Jesus spoke this parable to the hearers that were listening, but they did not understand. Go back to where he touched that blind man, and his sight came to him. They did everything they could. They even threw the man out of the temple. You can't be a member here. Everybody's welcome in the house of God, and if that's not so, then nobody should be welcome. That goes for the temple too. But they had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the do-gooders. And they all three were lost. The second part of our lesson, or second part of the first part. Jesus is the door. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Who is the door to the sheep? Who is the door? This lady had a bag of oranges, and she asked this other guy, says, listen, if you can tell me what's in this bag of oranges, I'll give them to you. He said, I believe they're blueberries. He said, no, that's not right. She said, well, what is in the bag then? Who is the door? Jesus. Jesus. That was too hard, wasn't it? I'm going to have to ease up on these hard questions. Listen, Jesus is the door, and if any man enters, he shall be saved. The door is open to all. Verse number 8. All who ever come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. Who is Jesus calling us thieves and robbers? Is that the one we want to talk about? Well, there's a lot of people in it for one thing. Filthy lucre. Put fresh oil in. Don't put that old stuff that's already been run 200,000 miles. Fresh oil. The door is open to everyone. All we have to do is just enter in, believe. Now, who is Jesus calling thieves and robbers? False shepherds like the Pharisees and the chief priest are not true Old Testament prophets. In verse number 9, I am the door. How many ways into salvation? One way. One way. Excuse me. Burp. Forgive me. I walked through the door. Once you walk through the door and accept salvation, no matter if you're under bondage, you're still free. Free. In verse number 10, the thief does not come except to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Christ speaking, I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. The thief, his interest is in one thing, and that's himself, not the sheep. Well, we're halfway. I guess that's better than being the whole way. Part 2. Oh, my goodness. Thank God there's only 3 of them. Jesus is not a hired hand. Wow. I guess we're all guilty about thinking about hired hands. Lord, I need help and I need it now. You know I got to go to town and I got to make my mind up whether I'm going to buy that fur coat or I'm going to just get a hoodie and go on about my life. I need an answer right now, Lord. He's not a hireling. Come on in there, Dot. Good to see you today. Go ahead, Randy. Give her a hand. Why is Jesus called the Good Shepherd? Well, appreciate everybody answering at one time. Why is Jesus called the Good Shepherd? A good shepherd might risk danger. A shepherd might risk danger for his sheep, but he is expected to come back alive. Does that make sense? He's willing to do everything, but he's expected to come back alive. Here Jesus says that he is the good shepherd and he will die for his sheep. He didn't come down here to just exist. He came down here to die for you and I. And folks, when we stand before him in the great tribulation, We're going to thank him 1,000,000 times, and it still won't be enough for coming down and giving us this opportunity. Why is a hireling not the shepherd? Why is a hireling not the shepherd? He is in it for the money, the wages, not the sheep. When the fox comes after the sheep, he's adios amigo. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm not here to give my life for these sheep. I'm here to collect my money. Christ did not, he wept in the Garden of Gethsemane. If there's any other way. Randy, but it wasn't another way. And he accepted it. Can you imagine? The creator of the universe. He added that for you and I. Why is Jesus the good shepherd? Because he knows his sheep and the sheep knows him. Now, who did Jesus lay his life down for? Everybody raise your hand. That's who he raised his hand. That's it. Now, in verse number 16, this is a pretty good verse here, so I'll read it. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. Who's he talking about? Raise your hand again. That's who he's talking about. He died for everybody. He laid his life down for everybody. Whosoever will. Are you a whosoever will? This verse refers to all those outside of Judaism. That's you and I. Who killed Jesus? Verse 17 and 18. Who killed him? Nobody killed him, did they? He laid his own life down. There's a word called kenosis. That's one of those quarter words. He emptied out certain things when he came to this earth. One was omnipresent. He couldn't be everywhere at one time. Nobody's ever seen God, so he had to empty that part out. So if he laid his eyes on you then, what time is it? He had to empty some of these things out so that he could be a man. He laid his own life down because had he not, nobody could have killed him. Omnipresent, the vision part, to look on him and not die, and the fact that he laid his life down, and he rose again. Now, why was there a division with the Jews? Well, some believed, some didn't. That's what that was all about. Verse 22 and verse number 23 talks about the Feast of Dedication. They celebrate Hanukkah for that now. I'm going to read one more verse of Scripture and then I'm going to let you go. I maybe can't even find it. Bless my heart. But the verse says, I and my Father are one. I believe that's in, verse number 30. He's telling them exactly what they want to hear, but they won't listen. I and my Father are one. Thank you for coming to church this morning. God bless you.